Welcome to Telecreations. I've gone too far again, haven't I? Okay. In this video, we're going to be talking about what you could arguably class as the boring masterpiece. I think I'm doing interesting framing here, hence why I look like this. Wow. Anyway, so this isn't a bad criticism against these films, despite the fact of calling it the boring masterpiece. It's more or less this kind of thing of, you get a film that is usually over 2 hours, 2.5 to 4 hours kind of deal. Long film, but is considered to be a masterpiece by critics, by audiences, by whomever. Not more like the smallest of majorities, but like the smallest of minorities, I mean. Like as in like big pockets of people will all superbly agree that this is a masterpiece. And I don't know, I feel like I have several examples. My main one is 2001: A Space Odyssey. But you can also put in stuff like Twin Peaks: The Return, and I don't know, something like Lawrence of Arabia. They're films that, and in this case, yes, I'm counting Twin Peaks: The Return as a film. Just if you look at it as the longevity of its 18-hour-long runtime, they're long. They have slow pacing, slow explanations, if anything. Maybe hardly any dialogue or actions between minutes of screen time, but they've all got something to them that adds to that quality. So they emphasize themselves in their visual narrative. They've got very expansive, say, visual scenes like Lawrence of Arabia, especially. Like the whole first 2 hours of that film is just beautiful shots in the desert. It's amazing. You do have enough narrative context to set up, and you get enough narrative that slowly goes along, but there are a lot of times where you've just got the characters traveling on camel or on horses, or walking through the desert, however it be, with music, musical accompaniment scoring their travels. You've got your often, maybe an action scene here or there, but a lot of it's very dispersed. It's a 3.5-hour long film. It takes its time. It even has an intermission. 2001: A Space Odyssey is obviously more split in terms of its narrative. You've obviously got like the Dawn of Man kind of deal with the apes. No dialogue, no setup as to what's going on. It's all visually told. It takes its time. It knows what it's doing. And then, you've got your wonderful transition. Boom, now you're in space. Do you think you're going to expect more dialogue or more explanation or more of a story? What the hell's the arc here? What's happening? Who are our main characters? All that jazz. You do, but slowly. It takes time. And even then, it just kind of uses that middle section to set up a mystery that then gets paid off in the last half of the film, pretty much. The whole HAL 9000 through to the pill, obelisk in space kind of deal. So, and again, visual storytelling. There's not much told through dialogue, narration, or anything. There's literally no narration in the film. There's just dialogue through some characters talking to other characters, but it's mostly visual. A lot of the dialogue in that film is mostly to set up what's happening in terms of what the characters are kind of doing, in a way. Like the space station stuff, when you first get into space, is them talking about how something happened on the moon. So it's setting up the mystery of what's happened on the moon. Then you get a visual thing of, there's this just pillar of blackness that's just there for no fucking reason, and it's caused a mystery. And then like the next patch of dialogue is when you're getting introduced to the crew of the ship with HAL 9000. You learn, and that's just through an interview. So you're getting an understanding of who these characters are, what the journey is, and who HAL 9000 is, setting up all that kind of stuff, so you care enough about both the villain of it, HAL 9000, and the human characters, and you watch that all go through. Then there's something like Twin Peaks: The Return, which obviously you need the setup and context of the previous 2 seasons of the show, plus the prequel, and, I mean, if you're a Daredevil, which you should be, because it's David Lynch, the missing pieces as well. And so there's a lot to it. You could obviously read the Mark Frost books as well, but I that's if you want to. I have, doesn't mean you have to. So then you get to an 18-hour long miniseries. That's the 3rd season of the show. To some diehard fans, it's an 18-hour long movie. No, they have not watched it in an 18-hour long run. No one's fucking doing that, alright? I don't know anyone who would do that. I would do it over a couple of days. I would not do it over a literal 18, 16 hour period. That especially, despite what knowledge you may have had of the previous two seasons, the movie and all that stuff helps. Gives you enough context for the characters, because this season ain't wasting time. It's not being like, this is Dale Cooper, he used to be FBI, this is what happened to him, and this is, it's like, nah, fuck that. It's not like every episode's going to start with previously on, and then recap, like, the past 25 years of Twin Peaks history. Instead, it's like, fuck that, we're just doing this thing. It's weird, it's completely disjointed, but then once you finish the whole 18-hour trip and you go back and watch it again, you realize how connected the whole thing was to begin with, and you're like, oh my god, it's a masterpiece. Maybe you wanted Cooper to be back from the get-go and it to be about good versus evil, but no, Cooper isn't there for the first 16 episodes. He's just a comatose version of himself as Dougie, and it's great. You've got all these wonderful characters who are in this nightmarish world from the world that we knew originally in the original run of Twin Peaks. A world that had quirk and comedy and lightheartedness and prosperity, despite the evils that were definitely there under the surface, that were slowly being uncovered. This time it's completely flipped. There is hardly any happiness left. It's mostly just darkness and despair. But then you got those little cute things of Dougie, and you got some of those Twin Peaks characters from the original series who just have their own fun and have their own side quests happening. So the point of what I'm trying to get at is, for a casual viewer, they may have heard a lot of things about, let's just say 2001: A Space Odyssey. They'll go into it being like, okay, so what's happening? I can imagine, I'm trying to remember the first time I watched it. I first watched it on DVD when I was in my early teens. I wasn't big on watching Kubrick stuff. I hardly knew who he was, but I'd heard of a lot of his films, especially The Shining, A Clockwork Orange, and 2001: A Space Odyssey. I hadn't seen any of his works. Hold on, let me check. I hadn't seen any of his works yet. I think I had seen parts of, if not all of, Spartacus as a kid, because I used to watch a lot of long movies as a kid. It was very convenient, I used to love watching the Lord of the Rings extended versions, because I never complained, because it was long and it was entertaining, and you're a kid, who cares? And so, I think I watched Spartacus as a kid. I know I've seen a lot of it, but I can't remember a lot of it at the same time, because I haven't watched it for such a long time. But his first full film that I chose and sat down and watched was 2001: A Space Odyssey. I watched it on DVD. I know, not a big thing. Oh, what DVD? The Blu-ray existed by this stage. I know. And again, I wasn't a stickler for quality back then. Because this was probably... I was between the ages of 14 and 16. And I just decided, fuck it. It's a 3-hour long film. I think it was a Thursday night, but I had the next day off or some shit. I don't know if it was a curriculum day or some bollocks. I just decided, fuck it, I'm watching it. Actually, I think it was a Friday night, and Mum had gone to bed, but luckily her bedroom was the other side of the house, because she worked on Saturdays back then. And so Dad and I watched it. We just fucking sat down and watched it. I was like, hey, it's midnight. Actually, I think it was 11 o'clock, and we're like, let's watch 2001: A Space Odyssey. 3 hours later, I'm like, that was a really interesting film. I think by that stage because again, I'd grown up with a lot of long films, so I was okay with watching stuff like that, I was like, who cares? It'll be fun. I knew it was going to be a long trek, I knew it was going to be an experience. It's the same thing when I first watched Lawrence of Arabia. I knew I had a whole day to myself with no one else home, and I had the 4K Blu-ray, just the 4K transfer on Blu-ray. I'm like, fuck it, I've got a whole day to myself, I'm watching Lawrence of Arabia. 3.5 hours later, almost 4 hours, because it's 3 hours and 48 minutes. I'm like, this is a fucking good movie. Yeah, it's a long movie, but it's it's thrilling despite its longevity. I even rewatched it recently at the Astor in 70mm. I watched it with my girlfriend, who, she isn't accustomed to a lot of these kind of long films, which is the reason why I'm making this video. I'm not making this video to criticize her or her friends. It's more of this whole mindset of, you go into a long movie, but your expectation is that, oh, it's long, it's 3 hours or whatever. She's not used to long movies. She grew up watching Disney films, I don't think she'd watched many films that were 2 hours long. Even a 2 hour long film, she would think, is a long film. she would even say either during it or after it that it felt like a long film, you know, and that was just because she was aware of how it's 2 hours long. We watched Aliens, 2 hours long. She thought that was long. The next day I showed her Aliens, which is 2 hours and 15 minutes. She was lucky I didn't show her the special edition. I think because Alien had a slower pacing, it made it feel longer. But Aliens had a consistent pace, you know, consistent action sci-fi. So, you know, it had a different feel to it. The next day I showed her Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. She loved them. The atmosphere, everything about it was great. She didn't complain about the timing of those, which was much better, I think, because there was a lot more visually going on. Whereas Alien's very quiet and slow. There's not like expansively gorgeous shots or anything because you're in a spaceship or whatever. Then we watched Lawrence of Arabia at the Astor. And she did mention how, you know, because she mentioned about to her friends that she was watching it, and they were like, "Oh, if I was watching it, I would have fallen asleep in the first half an hour," all that kind of stupid bahoney. And so, you know, she even mentioned how she didn't think it was that fantastic a film. She liked it. She thought it was visually nice, which is why I went to see it. Because to see it in the Astor, big super screen, 70mm, it's like, this is perfect for, despite its runtime, this is perfect to watch. And, you know, it's the only reason why I went to watch it, because I'd already seen it the year beforehand. I'm like, fuck it, I want to watch it in 70mm, that'll be great. And it was like exceptional, it was gorgeous. I only felt like there was two parts that felt a bit long, but that was fine. And so she didn't care as much for it, I think because maybe she wasn't so emotionally interested, she wasn't so narratively interested, to the point where we got to the intermission, she reread the whole synopsis of the film up to that point, just so she could, you know, kind of refresh herself. Because she, again, isn't the kind of consumer who would watch a narrative that takes place over a long period of time, where it's slowly giving you narrative points instead of narrative point. My comparison there is like a Netflix miniseries that goes for like, you know, 8 to 10 episodes. It's like, what, you're happy to binge pretty much an 8 hour long movie, and you think that that's not boring, but then you think a 4 hour long movie is boring if you watch it in one sitting. But there is a difference there. It's like, you know, her friends will complain about saying like, oh, you know, if it was a 4 hour long movie, they'd fall asleep half an hour in. They don't even know what the pacing's like. They don't know how the narrative is like. It could be consistent stuff happening for 4 hours. Think Once Upon a Time in America. Once Upon a Time in America. That's a 4.5 hour long movie. That's the longest film I've ever watched. I've seen the extended cut in cinemas, and it's a consistent pacing. Things are consistently happening because you're jumping back and forth between time, and there's a lot of stuff happening. It's still taking its time. It's clever about it. It's letting you live in the world, understand the characters. But it's jumping a lot, so you've got a lot of narrative that's filling in the gaps. You're understanding where the main character has gotten to and how he's gotten to that point. It's a very well done story, but then it also proceeds to what happens after that point. That's pretty much post the intermission anyway. And so it comes to this detail. There are long movies that are like Lawrence of Arabia or 2001: A Space Odyssey, and definitely Twin Peaks: The Return, that are very narratively thin. They have something going for it. A lot of it's very interpretive, and you've got to understand it through the visuals. You've got to understand what the film's telling you from the visuals itself. And some people just don't get that, which I don't know if I can criticize them, because it's like, what, I'm going to call someone pathetic because they think 2001 Space Odyssey is too long and too boring? Look, I personally don't think it's a very enthralling film. It's kind of boring in its own right. That's why I've only watched it 4 times. That sounds weird when I say it like that, doesn't it? Like, in the past 6 years, I've watched it 4 times. I watched it on DVD. I watched it twice in theatre, because I watched it when they re-released it in theatre, and then they re-released it again at the Astor in 70mm. Actually, I think I've watched it 3 times. I watched parts of it on my 4K disc. But I'd only recently watched it like a few months prior to that, so I didn't want to rewatch it fully. So, nevertheless, I'm the kind of person who will watch a long-ass film. I've watched Twin Peaks: The Return 3 times. You know, I love that shit. I watch it once a year. It's great. You know, I love watching long movies like that. I like them when they take their time. My favorite film is Blade Runner 2049. It's almost 3 hours long. I've watched that 4 or 5 times, you know? I watched it 3 times in 1 year. I watched it twice last year. No, was it last year? I might have watched it twice last year. Fuck, I've watched it 7 or 8 times since it came out. That was 2017. Look, I don't know. I'm not here to say that long films can be boring, but the thing is that there are films that are considered masterpieces that, yes, have that deeming quality to it that some people just don't, they just can't watch it, you know? They can't sit through a film without going on their phone for a bit, you know? Maybe it's a criticism in our culture right now where we're always on our phones, we've always got like immediate dopamine rushes from TikTok and Twitter and shit and Instagram and all that, all the social media stuff. And it's possible. I can't say that that's not a true thing. I know that I've watched films and I've rewatched films, and I'm sometimes just caught gone on my phone just for like 5 minutes, but then I'll go back to the film and be like, cool. It's because I've seen these films a lot. I don't have to re-immerse myself wholeheartedly. Like, it could be a day where I'm home from work. I can't be fucked watching a film I haven't seen yet, so I have to focus on it. I'm like, I just want a film on in the background. I'll be on my phone for maybe 30% of the movie, and I'll be watching it for the stuff that's really good. For the rest of it, I can just listen to it or see it through my peripherals or whatever. That's a criticism on me, where I'm entranced to go back to my phone, and I'm trying to train myself out of that. I mean, during Lawrence of Arabia, I didn't pick it up once during the Astor screening because I'm in a fucking movie theater. Luckily, no one did that. It was only during the intermission that people got on their phones. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if this is going to be a criticism on film audiences because at the same time, Avengers Endgame goes for 3 hours. It's a long film. But the thing is, it feels like 3 1-hour long films because they all have their own, literally, pretty much each act has its own thing. And that's not too bad of a deal, you know? It's pretty fun because you get, like, the first part is this depression. This is what's happened. How do we combat it? Second part, time travel. Got time travel hijinks. It's funny. It's action. It's great. It's nostalgia-inducing. The final act is a gigantic fight scene. And then, of course, the outcome of the epilogue. It's pretty fun to watch. And I know people who love the film and have watched it several times, despite its runtime. And look, it's fair enough. But will those people go out of their way to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey? To see it in its longevity and its whole runtime? I don't know. But we do live in a world where film audiences still go to see it, hence why they still replay in cinemas, like the Astor in Australia, in Melbourne, where they will replay these films. Today that I'm filming it, there was literally a screening of 2001: A Space Odyssey in 70mm again. They've been playing it for 3 years now in theatre, in 70mm. It's like, it's on for like 3 days every year now. Same as Alien and Aliens. They have a double feature of that every January, I'd say. I think they do it almost twice a year. I'm pretty sure, though, it's every January. They have a double feature. And they've kept escalating it, too. They just had the standard edition versions, then they had the standard edition of Alien, and the 70mm theatrical cut of Aliens, and now they've got the 4K of Alien, and the 70mm theatrical cut of Aliens. Eventually, I'd hope that they do the special edition of Aliens, but I don't think they will, and I don't really think they need to. Look, what do you think? I'm the kind of person who I love to watch these kind of movies, but at the same time, I like to make the time for it. You know, if I know there's going to be a film that's going to be long, I got to think about it, whatever, that kind of shit, then yeah, I'll wait till a good day to watch it. Like, I'm not going to just chuck on a Tuesday afternoon 2001: A Space Odyssey if I've got work the next morning. It's like, fuck that. I'm going to watch something that's just simple and easy, just something to entertain myself. Even if it's a film I'd never watched before, you know? It's interesting stuff. And look, again, sometimes you've got to introduce people to these films at their own pace. I grew up watching long films, Lord of the Rings and whatnot. So I'm doing the same for my girlfriend. I'm showing her all these films, not just because I love them, but because I want her to be able to experience these films and get an understanding that film is so vastly different. It could be a simple 90-minute animated Disney film about love and friendship, or it's a hard-hitting political drama, or it's fucking Swiss Army Man about a farting corpse. You know, it's anything. It could be anything, and that's what's also the joy of film. So it just comes down to that. I know this video is meant to be this kind of elaboration, this understanding of the boring masterpiece. And look, that's still a factor that remains. That sometimes these films, that though are considered masterpieces, are exceptionally long and can be narratively vague, but can be considered so highly because it is a top-tier display of its own art form. And that's what some of them are. Sometimes, I don't think a lot of people could go into 2001: A Space Odyssey as a casual film. I think as an appreciation of art and film and history, fuck yes. That's what I like to think of it as. It's not a casual watching film. I'll watch it once every couple of years, maybe once a decade, to just kind of re-immerse myself in this wonderful kind of sci-fi future that Kubrick designed, and just live in the visuals of it, like Lawrence of Arabia. Just live in the visuals of it as to how gorgeous it is. So yeah, in the end, that is what film is like, and it's been like that since the dawn of time. They used to have 3-hour epics like Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments, and people used to love that shit. You know, we hardly get that too often these days, but that's just what it is. And, you know, I'm not expecting that we're going to get a film like 2001: A Space Odyssey anytime soon that people will go insane for, but that's just what it is, you know. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, check out my long movies are good video. I think that's what I call it, something like that. So yes, check that out. It'll be on the screen or in the description. I don't know, or a playlist on screen, probably a video essay thing, whatever. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed it, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you next time on Telecreations. Adios, and keep watching long movies. All long videos. I do that too.